Well, hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining today's webinar, Post-COVID-19 Workforce Planning and Management Strategies. I'm Adria Barich, an associate for Consultants Collective, as well as the editor for Biznology. I will be moderating the Q&A on Slido. That's sli.do. And you can ask your questions by entering event code Consultants Collective, just as one word. Today's webinar is being presented by GEM and our consulting division, Consultants Collective. Following the webinar, a recording will be posted on biznology.com, and I will be sending you all an email after the event with your brief survey and a link to the recording so that you can share it with your colleagues. I'm joined by GEM CEO Jen McClure, as well as our featured speakers, Executive Coach Dana Look-Arimoto and Strategic Advisor John Sigmon.
Hi, everyone. This is Jen McClure, and I welcome you to our webinar this morning, and I'm really grateful to our speakers, Dana Look-Arimoto and John Sigmon, both of whom are members of Consultants Collective. Before we get started, for those of you who are not familiar with Consultants Collective, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our organization. We are a new kind of management consultancy, and we offer a really innovative, flexible, network-based approach to our consulting services. We have nearly 40 very impressive independent consultants, and we serve clients as one firm. As opposed to a traditional firm where we have career-based consultants, our consultants all have in-house executive level experience, which allows us to really provide a very peer-based approach and a very personalized approach to our consulting, advisory, and coaching services that we bring to our clients. Our flexible model allows us to bring together the right experts at the right time, and we have a wide variety of expertise and services. As you'll hear today, we're focusing on human capital, workforce planning, work-life integration, total workforce and gig economy, remote work issues, but we also have experts in technology, in finance, in marketing and communications, in quality and operational and organizational excellence. So it's really been a pleasure to build this out with these folks. And without further ado, I will announce today's speakers and turn things over to them. So Dana Look-Arimoto, in addition to being a dear friend and my coach, is a founding member of Consultants Collective, where she serves as an advisor, consultant, and executive coach. As a former CEO, Dana has more than 2 decades of experience leading talent ecosystems, and she is a recognized expert in the gig economy and total workforce planning, management, and work-life integration. She's also the author of Stop Settling, Settle Smart, Rethinking Work-Life Balance, Redesign Your Busy Life. And she provides executive and leadership coaching using her Stop Settling spectrum and her stratagem system to help people, teams, and leaders accelerate growth, results, and transformation. I'm delighted to have Dana here today. And John Sigmon is a senior consultant and executive coach with Consultants Collective. He's also a speaker and author. And his primary areas of focus are organizational transformation and executive leadership coaching. He's a former CHRO, most recently with the AARP. I love putting those 2 acronyms together. He's also certified as a senior professional in HR by the Society for Human Resources Management, and is board certified as a healthcare executive by the American College of Healthcare Executives. He is a certified coach by the International Coach Federation, and he's also certified as a stakeholder-centered coach and an administrator of the Global Leader Future 360 assessment. So Dana and John, thank you so much for being here today, and I will turn things over to you.
Thank you, Jen.
John, can we hear you too, or do I need to unmute you.
I'm sorry, I am here. I apologize.
No,
Thank you
it's
very
not
much
for you to apologize.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell our guest today that given all the Zoom security issues, we've had to do some additional things. So we apologize that things are a little bit more clunky. We're all learning here, and hopefully we have a good, secure, and smooth experience, but thanks for bearing with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
John, I think you're first, so I'm gonna be mute for a minute.
Oh, okay. So
I'm a rarity, indeed.
Well, absolutely. So as Jen was sharing a little bit, I'm thinking, I need you to be my coach.
Vice versa, buddy. Now
Well,
we have
well,
witnesses and a quorum.
yeah, we'll take that offline. So, listen, thank you so much for this opportunity, and it's great to be with all of you today. And it's good to see you, Dana. We haven't seen each other physically for a while, other than just kind of communicating back and forth. So, I'm hopeful that this is going to be a really lively and fruitful conversation. So I think maybe where I'd like to begin, if we could, is just kind of take a little half a step backwards. I've had dozens of conversations, I think, over the last week or two with a variety of different leaders around sort of what's next, and I think that this webinar is pretty timely with all of the chatter and all of the conversation about, how we're going to reopen and what things are going to look like and that whole bucket of stuff. So there are kind of three areas that I'd like to focus on a little bit, and maybe Dana, you and I could just have a little conversation about that. And that is, how are leaders recognizing and managing their own stress? So from an individual level, how does that translate to the teams that we have to lead? And then finally, sort of how does all of that work with the businesses that we're trying to either start back up or ramp up, as it were. And so those are kind of the three themes that have come out quite a bit, actually, over the last, 2 or 3 weeks, and having these conversations with various leaders. What are some things that you're hearing, Dana?
Well, first of all, what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling myself is uncertainty with a capital U. So there's modeling going on in terms of financials. There's modeling going on in terms of reductions in workforce and furloughs and how to cut and not to cut too deep, but how to actually preserve your company so that when we come out of this, whatever that means, whatever that looks like, whatever that doesn't look like, that a company is well poised. What I'm also seeing is that uncertainty coming into this, because let's face it, from a market condition standpoint, the market usually corrects itself financially around every 10 years. And we were at 12 years when this all hit. I'm seeing companies that were more well poised, well positioned, well oiled, more systemized, more operational, more really on top of becoming more efficient and agile, having an easier time during all of this than those that are using this event as a course correction. So that's really what I'm seeing. How about you?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. And what I've been encouraging people to do, and what they've actually sort of embraced, is what is the opportunity that this presents? Right. So if you think about that from sort of these three levels, again, sort of what is the opportunity this presents for me as an individual leader within an organization? What opportunities are presented to my team? And finally, back to the business, right? And so to your point, cash is king, right? And I'm encouraging a lot of people that I'm working with to start thinking about their business, regardless whether it's GE or Thomson Reuters or any other large business or small mom and pop, is to think like a startup. And there are lots of lessons that startups can give us in terms of kind of ramping things back up. So chief among those is speed, right? Kind of ramping up to make things, to your point, more agile, make them move more quickly. And sort of the flip side of that is how can you minimize bureaucracy? Right. And I think those are kind of a couple of hallmarks that I would look for the future, right, for organizations as they start to think about how they're going to ramp up their business, right, how they're going to get to where they need to be, and also driving, and this is something I'd like to hear a little bit more from you about, Dana, is driving this whole relationship between the customer experience and the employee experience, and recognizing that both of those groups are on their own journey. So if you're a business leader, whether you are running GE Aviation or whether you're running Bob's record store, right? Start thinking about what is the journey that your customers are on relative to this pandemic, and how can you match that journey, right? Because everyone's on their own. And finally, sort of how can you fold all of this into a compelling employee experience? So what happens oftentimes, as you know, Dana, employees operate with some relative ease outside of their organization. So for example, if I want to buy a stapler, right, I take a walk outside the door in normal circumstances. I go down the road to the office supply store and I buy a stapler. Largely within companies, a lot of times there's this bureaucracy, again, back to that, and the lack of speed and agility. And getting a stapler could be filling out 4 different forms and getting 3 levels of signature. That creates a huge disconnect. So now, in my estimation, is the time to start resolving some of that and trying to marry those 2 experiences together. So I know that that's really kind of well into your frame of reference, Dana, and I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are about some of that.
I love how you set this up, because I teach me before we. And for many of us, and in particular, shout out to women, I mean, we already wear so many hats. We might be wives and mothers and sisters and daughters and business leaders and business owners and friends and part of a church. I mean, the list goes on. Men too, you do wear multiple hats, but what I'm seeing is everybody compressed into the container of what I'm calling work-life integrated at home. We now are trying to actually have it all by doing it all at one time, even more than before, without an off button. So when you set it up, when we were talking earlier, I loved it that you're talking about self first, then the team, and then the organization. Excuse me. And for my clients that are on today's webinar, they're probably nodding their head, and they know this, that it's me, then team, then company. Because let's face it, what is a company without people? It might be a shell, it might be an edifice or a building, or in this case, it's right now our homes. Our homes are our companies, and we are all working in multifaceted ways inside of these new companies, which happen to be work-life integrated at home. So first we take care of self, and I'm seeing unbelievable examples of this that are not only reinforced by leadership, but really almost like insisted upon. And the other thing I've been talking to a lot of leaders about is leading by example. We've heard this for, 100 years. So I like to say people follow what you do and not what you say. So for executives that I coach right now across many industries, I'm saying to them, and they're responding beautifully, are you actually leading by example? So for example, I have a CEO I coach who we were talking about his concern for his team and how is their work set up at home? Do they have a little space that they can separate from their bedroom so they're not working from their bed, because it's a horrible idea? Do they have a baton they can pass? And Adria and Jen, I don't know if we can advance the slides, but if you can go to my slide, that would be great, because there's some fun pictures there. I know we want to do some polling, but I'm kind of on a roll. And thank you. And then there's John's cool slide too, self, team, and org. I love those concentric circles. And then if you go to my slide, you can see people either running away from each other, running the sprint inside the marathon while balancing on a teeter-totter, or the prescription is to run toward each other. And that includes your executives, your entire body of employees, your partner at home or family. And so if we are coming toward each other by taking care of ourselves, then taking care of each other, the greater good will benefit. And I cannot tell you how many examples of this that I'm seeing: virtual happy hours, virtual coffee clutches. I'm seeing people having like a birthday for their pet celebration just because we need to be social. And this is not all work example. A lot of this is actually neighbor examples. We had an example we heard yesterday where a neighborhood in a cul-de-sac was having a happy hour with at least 6 feet apart, but everybody kind of went out on their front porch in a little cul-de-sac and they had drinks or coffee or whatever, and they were yelling to talk to each other, but they said that was the best hour of their week. And then when they went back into their work mode inside that work-life integrated at home model, they felt more productive. And John, you and I both know this from all of our years of working with teams. It is performance enhancing to be energized with self first, like you talk about, then team, which might be your smaller team at work. It might be your family, which is your team, and then org, right? So I'm going to be quiet now, and your turn.
No, so here's what I really love about that is, that people are having this kind of conversation, right? And part of what I'm hearing from a lot of folks, and here's sort of my longing for our leadership, right? As for organizations and just globally, and that is that we bring more of ourselves to the workplace. Right. And so I'm hearing, so when you were sharing a little bit about what you were hearing about people who care about their teams and they're interested and they're having these virtual happy hours and things of that nature, I'm also encouraging people to start to develop some practices that you can sustain. So if today you are reaching out to your team and you're expressing a little vulnerability, or you're letting them know, hey, I care about you and I'm interested in what's going on in your life, and I'm concerned about your family and your well-being, and I have a longing for you. That kind of conversation, right? It can continue to drive that employee engagement and all the things that we really care a lot about. So now, while we have this time available to us, start thinking about what is the opportunity for me as a leader to show up in a different and a more compelling way, yet still be authentic to who I am as a human being and as a person. And just think about the engagement that can drive. And just a real quick aside with that, we all know that engagement drives results, right? We know that for a quarter of a century, the Standard & Poor's 500 organizations that score in the top quartile for employee engagement outperform their peers on an earnings per share basis by a factor of about 20%. Right. And that's been pretty solid for the last quarter of a century. And that employee engagement comes from things like my supervisor takes an interest in me. Right. Someone has spoken to me about my performance in the last 6 months. So continuing to drive that engagement and that people related piece of things can be really, really powerful. And finally, the other thing that I would suggest, and I've been sort of harping on with people quite a bit, is this idea of team collaboration. We talk about collaboration a lot. We talk about teamwork a lot. We throw around phrases like co-creation and things like that. But if you take a half a step back, in many instances, we haven't been doing that. Collaboration is, for example, I call a meeting, I hand out an agenda, I send out a slide deck, I get everybody to nod their head, and I say we've collaborated, right? And so kind of taking that a step further and thinking about what can I create as a leader from my team, and what can we create from each other? That's different from kind of co-creating or collaborating. It's what can I create from you, right? What energy are you bringing to this team and our effort? So that's a lot of kind of talking for me. So I'll kind of punt it back over to you a little bit, because I feel like that kind of fits in a lot with the model, with the settling smart model that you have put together.
Again, it's just so great to be in such alignment. So consensus is not collaboration. And so for companies that were operating in a consensus-driven model or a top-down driven model without any bottom-up or side-to-side movement, then we're really concerned for you coming out of COVID or any type of economic downturn or any type of disaster that occurs, natural or otherwise. So we're really concerned for you. So we want you to wake up a little bit, and we want you to realize that consensus-driven models do not work. And collaborative models are actually this formula that we call 1 + 1 = 3. So John's ideas and experience, plus Dana's ideas and experience, plus others' ideas and experience equals better. And that's why you get an exponential result. Now, I also want to comment on something you said in terms of workforce planning. So a lot of companies are struggling right now, of course, for demand and future forecast planning for talent. Of course you're struggling because you don't know what the economics are going to look like. So we're modeling in terms of worst case scenario. I was on the call yesterday with a CFO and a CEO. The CFO wanted to model down to a 30% loss in terms of top line. I'm not even going to comment on EBITDA. The CEO felt very optimistic and had a different perspective. That's usually where I come in. I'm like a board member tiebreaker, even though I'm not on their board. And the CEO was like, absolutely not. We're doing 18%. I'm like, whoa, this gap is huge. So to collaborate, instead of saying like, okay, we're going with the CEO because that person has the most voting power, or the CFO has a better vantage point and is a better modeler, which in this case he was. I said to the two of them, I said to her and to him, listen, instead of trying to just come to the middle so we can get this over with, we're going to stay on this call until we actually model this. And I was referring to the movie Dave. I don't know if you remember that movie.
Yeah, I do.
And Dave is this owner of a temporary staffing company, ironically, because many of you know I spent 22 years in non-employee and temporary staffing and labor. And he goes in to take over as a temporary president. He fills in for the president who's sick and in a bunker somewhere. And he balances the budget in this magical moment. I've totally read the movie for those of you that haven't seen it. And for those of you that are millennials, you're not going to want to watch it. Trust me. My kids are Gen Z and they're like, really, Mom? So he balances the budget, but it's incredible how he does it. And it's kind of like, we're not leaving this room until we come up with a solution that works, but it takes every single person around the proverbial table to come up with a model that works. And so here's the punchline. If you're sitting with a team virtually now, and you notice someone like this, they're very quiet, they're pushing back, they look blank, they're not taking notes, they're not chatting, they're not trying to get in, their eyes don't sparkle. I want you as leaders to call them out. So I would say, John, so I'm coming to you next, so prepare your thoughts. Or I want to hear from you, John. I might say, John, you've been a little quiet today. Let's check in. And if John were to say, oh, I'm just having a really hard day. I dealt with something personal before coming into this board meeting or this conference room virtual meeting or this team meeting, you might say, hey, John, do you want to talk about it now? Because we're all here for you. Or do you want to take it offline with me and I'll follow up with you after? So to John's point, now's the time to go in and to be really authentic, take that mask off and check in with people and get the most out of them, because it's a way to help them lift from feeling so low about everything and all the uncertainty. And to get their best performance, we need to make sure they're engaged. The final thing I want to say, and I'll turn it back to you, John. John alluded to this, but I'm just going to say it more directly and bluntly because I'm very blunt, as many of you know, and those of you that don't, now you do. It's also about accountability. So I talked to a leadership team a couple of days ago who was noticing productivity was going down, down, down with the team. And they said, but of course that's to be expected. And I said, hang on a minute. With unemployment, the highest it's been as long as I can remember. I don't remember the last recession having unemployment in these numbers. And with the risks that were, John, unfortunately, having to help companies model to take, people out of companies, maybe that are really good employees, but the company just can't afford to keep everybody, and figuring out how to do that. It's a really rough time. So if you're working and you're gainfully employed and able-bodied, then let's get productive. Let's hold people accountable, because the truth of the matter is, if people feel they're contributing and they feel valued, and to John's point, they feel heard and understood and cared for, guess what? They're not going to be as low, because no matter what's happening in our world, human beings are adaptable and we need to contribute. And we need to contribute in multifaceted ways, whether that's giving back to community, giving back to our family. Let's hope, which is not a strategy. My own clients are going to yell at me for just saying that. It came out. Let's make sure we take care of ourselves and we're giving back to ourselves so we have enough energy to give to our companies. But contributing to our company is a way through and out in terms of being much more productive and feeling more engaged. I don't know. What do you think, John?
Yeah, listen, here's what I love about what you just said. And in so many words, you basically said, listen, we don't want, as leaders, we don't need to let people off the hook, right? And we don't need to let people off the hook, and we don't need to let ourselves off the hook. So I'm going to circle back to the conversation I had earlier in the week, and I was talking to someone and he was letting me know that, how much he cares about his team, right? And my question is, do they know that? Well, I don't know. Well, how do they know? Well, I don't know. So that's a problem. Right. And going into the environment that we're in now, your ability to be, listen, not to change, to be really clear, this is not about changing who you are as a person. Right. But if you tell me that you care about your team, and I sense this deep caring, and they don't know that, that's a problem. So figuring out how can you let your team know that you care about them in that example is vitally important, and not letting yourself off the hook for managing through that and dealing with that. And I love the example that you gave a little earlier about kind of holding people's feet to the fire. And that's really about staying in that uncomfortable place to get the results that you're looking for. And that's where the creativity can come in. Right? And so I implore anyone listening within earshot to please take this opportunity, right? Think about how it is that you need to work with your team. What do you need to resolve for yourself? And to your point a little bit earlier, Dana, you know, we've talked many times over the last week or so about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So you remember that maybe from your high school or university psychology course. And it's sort of this idea of checking in, you know, kind of the new way that you're going to interact with your team, right? And you're going to start by checking in, right? Where is everyone? Because you can't leap all the way to your business unit strategy when people are worried about their sick relative in a nursing home, or they're worried about catching up on their bills, or they have a child that has to go back to school and they're worried about all of those things. That will have to be checked, right? And the only way to do that is to your point, is to call it out and to ask people, where are you? How are you doing? What can I do to help? Right? And so that way you can drive the engagement and the profitability and all of the things that kind of come downstream from that. But it really does start with me as a leader and how I show up with my team.
Let me echo what John just said, and I'd like you all to take a minute, and this is probably a good cue for Adria, that we would like to do some polling in the next minute or two. If you are not showing up as your authentic self right now, this is the shout out to you. It is time, for example, I'm on video today, I have no makeup on, so what? If you're judging me right now, shame on you. I just thought, screw it. I'm not going to put makeup on today. I wasn't sure we were having video or not, by the way. I'm glad that we are, because I like to see your face, John. So, you know, just show up as your authentic self. Now, to John's point, if you aren't used to showing up as your authentic self at work, you're probably struggling right now a little bit to try to pretend or mask that everything is normal. Now, I don't know about all of you listening today, but I'm a little tired of hearing the new normal, the new normal, the new normal. However, we don't know what this looks like coming out of this. So I would encourage you to take the mask off, be your authentic self, and then when we come back, whatever shape, flavor, nature that takes on, ideally it doesn't look like what it looked like pre-COVID. We need to learn something here about being more green, about being more virtual, about changing the mix of our workforce to protect our critical and key and core employees, and to flex around them with freelancers or contractors, consultants, gig workers, seasonal workers, interns, whatever the mixed model for workforce planning makes sense for you. And there's ways to do that. John and I both have too many years of experience of how to create that model. I want you to really think about coming back authentically, because some of the lessons learned right now need to be applied going forward. Some of you went virtual with hundreds of employees in less than a day. I have one miraculous client with over 100 employees. They went virtual in 5 hours across multiple locations throughout the United States. 5 hours. That is amazing. Talk about flexibility and adaptability. So write down as a team, especially HR, talent acquisition, people officers, and executives, write down the top things that have worked over the last 4 to 6 weeks that you might not have done before, and make sure those are going to carry forward. The final thing I want to say before we go to polling, and John, help me here, is about employee handbooks. I'm going to not give my opinion. John, is now the time to update your employee handbook with some of the new ways you want to operate when you come back? Yes or no?
Yes. If that's so, if I'm going to be forced into giving a yes or no answer, the answer is going to be yes. But can I qualify that?
Of course. Dear time, man.
Thank you. Hey, so I have a very distinct opinion about most employee handbooks. I do recognize their value. So let me just kind of preface my comments by saying I recognize their value and the need for an employee handbook in many instances. My personal philosophy has often been, I've never seen an employee handbook that I didn't think should be thrown in the trash and set on fire. And so as organizations start to kind of walk back into the workplace and we start to ramp things up and figuring out what's going on with that, I mean, clearly your policies and your processes and your procedures and your guidelines and your handbooks and maybe even your collective bargaining agreements, lots of things are going to have to shift and are going to have to change. My encouragement for everyone is to take this opportunity to think about that in a fresh and new way. Just as a quick example, so the last time I worked with a large organization around policies, we went from around 120 some odd policies down to 13 using a very simple framework, right, that said, is this policy legally required? Is it ethically responsible and the right thing to do for our employees? Or is it driven by the employees? Have the employees themselves asked us to put in place a dress code policy? Right? And if what we have in place meets those three criteria, you're golden. If it doesn't meet one of those three criteria, then it's put into the questionable pile. So whatever works for your organization is really, really important. And if you have a handbook, it will absolutely need to be updated along with all the other policies and everything else we just talked about.
I love that example that John gives. This is the new normal. I'll use the lingo. The new normal is let's do what works and dump what doesn't. Now's your chance, especially HR professionals. You're dealing with disaster recovery and codes of conduct and crisis mode and brushing off business continuity plans. None of your BCPs had COVID in there. It didn't, right? No one predicted this, believe me. We've listened to every futurist say, nope, didn't see this one. And so what we'd love you to do is what John just suggested, which is if it's legally required, obviously you're going to have that somewhere that people are signing off on. I'd also ensure that you hold them accountable to it. The dress code one's such a good example. Now, I've been in Silicon Valley for 20 years, so our dress code is kind of like jeans and, a cute top, or if you're a guy, jeans and a decent shirt and, flip-flops. I'm kidding sometimes. So if your dress policy is really critical to your organization and your culture, that's fine. But then don't complain to the, consultants that come in to help you with your people strategy that people are dressing inappropriately every Friday because they took it too far on casual day. That's not about the handbook or the policy, may I just say.
Exactly.
Okay, she's getting preachy.
Yeah, it's all good. So, one thing that I have noticed in all of this lately that from my perspective is actually a good thing. And you mentioned it just a few minutes ago. So you mentioned you don't have on any makeup and people sort of see your background. I have a little bit of a fake background. But one of the things I've noticed is it's become much more acceptable, for example, for my dog to suddenly come walking in the room, or for my child to knock on the door, et cetera. And I've noticed that a lot more. People feel a lot freer in that regard. And I guess, some people probably don't like that, but quite honestly, I find that a little refreshing, right? I mean, I think that we spend so much time and so much energy trying to impress people and make, show up in the right way, say the right thing, look the right way, et cetera. And in some ways, this pandemic has stripped away some of that. So for example, right now, it's not going to happen, but if my dog came walking in the room, I'm just not going to freak out about it. It's not going to be a big deal to me. It might be a big deal to somebody else, but I think that to me is a nice sort of a side benefit of all of this.
I call this inside out, and John knows this. I had 3 rescue dogs. We now have a 4th. My husband went a little nuts and decided we needed to rescue a deaf dog during COVID. So 3 weeks ago tomorrow, we rescued a 4th dog. So it's almost impossible for me to not have a dog show up here and there. And what I've said to my clients is, it's bring your dog to work day. Like, we're all Google now. Hallelujah. You can bring your dog to work. And so let's lighten up about this stuff. I'll give you one more example, and then let's try to do a little polling. So I have a couple of clients that have done an amazing job internally with connecting with people and virtual town halls that are open Q&A forums where they're talking about anything and everything, getting more into people's heads and figuring out what they need, what they want, what's working, what's not beyond work, and also staying social with each other, checking in, really creating a beautiful cultural additive way of operating so that coming out of this, people are tighter. They know each other more holistically. They aren't doing it as much with their clients. So I've been issuing some challenges as well, that if you're a client, insist also on, hey, I want to see your dog. You don't have to hide that from me. Or, John, I want to see your John Lennon poster that sits behind. Is that who it is? Sorry, I just outed you. Who cares? It's John Lennon, right?
That's okay.
Is that who it is?
It is.
It would have been so embarrassing if it wasn't. And for a minute, I was like, wait a minute, was that Hendrix? No. Was that? No? Okay, wait, it's those glasses. Okay. So, we all could use a little bit more of our authentic selves showing up to work. And so with your clients, I encourage you also do a virtual happy hour, have a coffee meeting. You don't have to just make all the cultural additive stuff happen inside your organization. You do want that with your vendors, your partners, your clients. I mean, we're doing it with our loved ones. I'm hearing stories of grandparents that have never used a technology like Skype or Zoom or go to meeting or webinar or any of those, actually using it. It's incredible. So we're elevating access for people that aren't normally that technical, who are figuring it out, because again, we're adaptive. So should we do some polling?
Let's do it.
Okay. I don't know how to do that, but I bet Adria does. Oh, look at her.
She knows.
Adria, you're magic. She's magical. You can't hear her or see her, but she's magical.
Oh, it's actually Jen. This is all Jen.
Oh, Jen. Hi, Adria.
I'm magical
Jen.
too.
Jen, you are magical. Jen, do you want to walk us through it? We'd love to hear your voice.
All right. So first of 5 polls, you guys have been a little freeform, so we're going to go here. What is your current focus? Navigating the remote work environment, planning for return to normal, capitalizing on opportunities, formalizing, recruiting, retention, sustainability, promotability, or other. Okay. I think we're going to end the poll. Looks like the results have stopped. Okay.
Interesting. So it's almost it's a tie, huh, in the middle. Interesting. So, John, do you want to comment on that first?
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, that makes sense to me, right? I think that probably we have, 20 or so odd people on the call. I'm guessing that the people who are on the call aren't having any challenges navigating a remote work environment, because clearly you're pretty savvy with working with a remote technology. So that's good. And I do think that sort of the capitalizing on opportunities, that's sort of where a lot of my focus has been. And it feels like that's where, and what I'm hearing is that's a lot of focus of the people that I'm working with is, what's the opportunity here and how can I kind of navigate through that? I do think that also to your point earlier, Dana, about the workforce planning piece of the recruiting, sustainability piece of things is also incredibly important. And when organizations come back together in whatever form that they come back together in thinking about what are the skills we need for leaders at all levels in our organization, and how are we going to develop those skills with people who there may be a gap, and more importantly, how are we going to recruit for and pull people into our organization who have those skills already, and what do our competencies look like now in sort of the advent of this new way of working and this new way of being. So I think that what's showing up here makes a lot of sense to me.
I agree. For sake of time, so we don't run out of time, Jen, can we go to the next polling question?
We can.
Great. I love what John said about competencies. Really think about those, y'all. And if your competencies aren't clear and not going to sustain you going forward, coming out of this and thinking forward 18 to 24 months at least, maybe 3 years, really work on those competencies, because I guarantee they've changed. A lot of you had B and C players in your organizations, and you used COVID as an example, which we can see throughout history. There are other examples where that's how you end up changing your workforce and laying people off or doing reductions in force. That's actually really sloppy. So let's think about competencies and what our organizations really need, which accelerate people. Go ahead, Jen. Sorry about that. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So there clearly will be some change, right? And it's a little all over the place, as I would kind of expect. A lot of it is people are sensing it's going to be moderate, but the change will actually be there. So again, sort of 33% extensive. That's a pretty telling stat.
And for those of you that felt it would be extensive, I would encourage you, if you're in a peer group or you talk to coaches or you're talking to just other people that are struggling with the same kinds of things in any affinity kind of a way, model yourselves extensively, and then it's okay to plan for moderate, but be prepared for extensive. So make some shifts now that you've been wanting to make. Now is your chance to make those changes coming out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that just sort of reminds me of a conversation I had with someone a few weeks back. And, it's a large sort of publishing house, if you will. And, you have to stop and think, if you were going to create a publishing business today, using that as an example, would you create it the way that you have it now, with all of this, all of the capital assets wrapped up in that, and all of the employees that you have, and all. So if you were to recreate that from scratch, would it look that way? And of course, the answer to that is no. It wouldn't look that way at all. You'd have a lot more freelance. You'd do a lot more things digitally. You would offload those capital assets. You would have a much more remote and virtual workforce. You'd be pulling in information from across the globe rather than from a finite little community. So there's lots of things that you would do differently. So what can you do? What's the opportunity? What can you step into? What can you start unfolding today that would lead you to that workforce strategy that you're looking for in the kind of the new environment, if you will, something that's sustainable?
Yeah. Jen, can we do the next one? This is helpful. So let's take a minute here, and this is really important. Let's point out the two words we want you to focus on: emotion and action. And that might be an and, not an or, and it probably is. They're experiencing anxiety. You yourself are experiencing anxiety, confusion, hope, creativity, community, teamwork. Here come the results. Yeah. Huh, interesting. So talk about juxtaposition. Wow. Go ahead, John.
Wow. So yeah, I'm clearly not surprised by the anxiety. I'm a little, and the community / teamwork makes a lot of sense as well. It's curious to me about the confusion, hope, and creativity. So that, I think, is, in many ways the antidote to some of these things is how, as a leader, can we start to generate more creativity with our teams? How can we instill more hope that, listen, things will be different, but we will come out of the end of this as well. So how, as a leader, can we continue to communicate with the clarity and the frequency that's necessary? And sort of to that end, what I've been counseling people around and coaching people on is to communicate with greater clarity and with more frequency than you believe is necessary. So whatever you think is needed, double it or triple it, because that's probably where you're going to hit that sweet spot.
So shout out to the daily huddles that I'm witnessing, which is 15-minute stand-up meetings. And do stand up, even though you're on video, or maybe not, just stand up, because it keeps us in our body and also helps us make sure, if you're able to stand up, if not, of course, sit down, that we are moving quickly enough through these meetings. So the agile huddle, not just for tech people, for any people, is Where is your highlight for this week? What is your low light for this week? And where are you stuck? And if you just cover that, you can get through a really rapid fire, awesome meeting and hear where everybody's at and celebrate some of the good highlights and deal with some of the lowlights. So there's no surprises. Now's not a good time for blindsiding. And then if people are stuck, it's usually because they need to collaborate, that word that we used earlier. We have time for one more poll, Jen?
Well, we have
we've got time.
So we've got
great.
time. We also want to do some Q&A. So let's go through these.
So most critical. John, we call this the 3 C's, huh?
Exactly.
Did we do that on purpose, or did it just work out that way?
I think it just worked out that way.
We are alliterative.
Exactly. All of the above.
Interesting. So let's spend a minute on clarity. So if you yourself aren't clear what needs to happen, don't expect that anybody else is either. Don't assume I'm the only one that doesn't understand the direction, the impact, the mission, what we're going to do coming out of this. Please speak up. What do you say, John?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And just if I could draw a little comparison here, thinking back about how it is that you're managing yourself as a leader, sort of, and where you are, there's not a single reputable model or framework or philosophy around change management or change leadership, however you want to describe it, that doesn't start with the leader. How clear are you on what needs to change? How comfortable are you with the change that's being proposed? All of the change frameworks start from that place. So to your point, Dana, getting clear with yourself, right, is going to help you be clear with your team.
I just want to echo, I've worked with John on some projects that involve change management. He's really amazing at it. I struggle with change management because I'm a very rapid fire, let's just get stuff done. Like I said, we were doing it, why aren't we doing it? And I've experienced that inside of global organizations where I was running teams across 30 some countries. So remember with change management, and this is really important right now, especially if you can see people on video, you can also listen for tone. Long pauses, deep sighs, really get to be an active observer and listener. John, are you all right? That was a deep sigh. So I really want you to become hyper aware. You are all leaders. You're all being called to lead. And that doesn't mean you have a big fancy title or you manage 100 people. That's not what we mean by leader. We mean leader of your life, including inside of your own container, which is your home. Let's lead, because this is the time for it. Okay, we have one more poll question, and then we'll go to question.
Cool.
Sorry, Jen.
And while I'm pulling that poll up, I do want to also talk about communication. We all know from our change management work that communication is key. The reason that change fails is because employees don't understand what's happening because they haven't been communicated with. And we are in a time of change. And we have 2 other webinars that folks can check out on Biznology, led by our wonderful consultants, Sharon McIntosh and Mark Dollins, and another by David Schlesinger, that's all about the importance of communications and also how leaders can communicate better.
Thank you. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah, we all need that. So here's your strategy. So this might take you a few extra seconds to answer. Everyone knows which question Dana wrote. Yeah.
Wow.
There's my club. Have a real happy hour. Screw the Zoom stuff. So Jen, thank you. This is the end of the poll, but before we get off of here and go to the audience questions, John, do you want to talk about that first one? Because that really won the contest here.
Yeah. So listen, I've been a big proponent of working from home for the last 15 years or so. And just to share a quick little story, my hero in that was a guy named David Walker. David Walker is the former Comptroller General of the United States. And when I worked with him about a dozen or so years or so ago, his philosophy was pretty simple. Every position in our organization that is eligible for remote working will be allowed to remotely work if they ask for it, right? And the supervisor better have a really good reason why they're not going to allow it, because our organization has gone through the drill of determining which positions, which roles are eligible to remotely work, right? And anyone who wants that can take advantage of that if they want to. And this was, again, a dozen or more years ago. So to me, that's vitally important, and starting to think about how you can integrate that and talk to your CFO. If you don't believe me, you don't believe that's important, check in with your CFO this week or next week, since we're at the end of this week, and find out what they're thinking about that, because I'm going to guarantee you that you're going to get some interesting answers out of that.
I'll just add to that, and we'll go to these audience questions. If you have a total rewards program or cafeteria plans for benefits, please, again, ask people what they want, and then people express what it is that you want. Let's not ask for ridiculous things, especially right now. Let's be socially conscious. However, if you are finding yourself doing a lot of home delivery for groceries and your company can stipend some of that instead of other benefits, then great. If you're struggling because you usually went to the gym that's on site at work and now you can't, there's Peloton, for example, and maybe you can get a coupon for that. We're not going to buy you all a Peloton machine. Let's not be out there, but let's make sure that we're recognizing what people need and that we're switching the way we administer our rewards plans and benefits. And the final example is daycare. We're really struggling as parents right now if we have little ones at home, because we're homeschooling and trying to figure out what to do to keep kids occupied and entertained and lower their anxiety while pretending we don't have anxiety. Of course we do. We saw that on the poll. So for the daycare scenario, I've seen some really cool things. For example, there's like a music together program where parents or providers that are in the home with the kids can get online and do a dance and music class. And you don't need a whole lot of space. You don't need equipment. And it's a very inexpensive scenario. And you can get memberships to these things for your employees. So now's a great time for you to think differently about what people want and what it is that you might offer in lieu of other benefits. And what we're also seeing is it can be more cost effective and more wellness providing, which is preventative, which also the CFO and Chief People Officer will love. So there's that. Okay, awesome. Should we take some questions?
Let's do it.
Yeah, it looks like we have some rolling in, but if you haven't already, please go to Slido, sli.do, and type in event code Consultants Collective. So what is critical for you and your team right now?
So that's the question, Adria?
Yes, it is.
So John, do you want to go first or you want me to?
No, sure. I will absolutely go first. So for me and the people that I'm working with, it really is about mining the opportunity that exists for us currently, right? It's just, you know, and I almost hesitate to even frame it up this way, but it's almost like a gift, right? And so taking advantage of that gift, what is the opportunity for us to create something new together, right? And also, what is the opportunity for me as a leader to start to rethink, what are my practices? What can I begin to implement? What can I sustain, right, over time? I hear a lot of people who have some downtime because they're not having to commute to the office, and they're saving an hour and a half a day, and that's great. And they're using that hour and a half to do yoga and to work out and those sorts of things. All wonderful. Yet, when this is over, how are you going to sustain that? And so helping people think through how to sustain the things that they're doing and what are the small things that they can do and leverage that can make a big difference. So that's what I'm focused on.
I'm going to challenge people to not work 24/7 because I'm seeing a lot of this. I can't turn off. And I get it because any of you that know me or like follow my Instagram or now listen to the new podcast, I'm talking about the struggle myself because I am a recovering workaholic. Yes, I have a problem. So it's hard to turn it off. And in particular right now, for some of it feels like a lifeline because it is contribution. And let's face it, we're scared. And for those of us that are financially really struggling, for example, many of us may be working, but our spouse no longer is or is laid off or all this uncertainty. Being a 24/7 work person is not going to serve you, your team, your company, let alone your family, friends, community. So just watch it, take breaks, make sure that you're holding others accountable for taking breaks if you're seeing this type of behavior. Please don't be emailing in the middle of the night, especially if you're leaders with teams. Just don't do it. Keep it in your drafts and send it the next day. If you're managing globally, which many of us are, be conscious. Like I have someone I'm working with who's in Hungary right now. It's like, do not send her that email at midnight her time. Don't WhatsApp her at midnight her time just because it's 3 p.m. my time or 4 p.m. my time. I can't even do the time conversion. See how unaware I am? What's the next question, Adria?
I actually have one for you guys. As you know, we have an amazing client who had to send their previously no remote workers home very quickly. And has already been able to kind of incorporate the learnings from that and rethink what the future will look like with a lot more flexible work and remote workers. For those who haven't been able to kind of grasp the lessons learned and start planning, I know, Danny, you talked about having, taking a list when you have those moments of clarity. But what are some other ideas that you guys have for how people can begin now to think about what comes next and to really start to rethink what is maybe working better and what could they incorporate into their new processes, policies, technologies, employee experience?
So I'll start, and John, I'll limit myself to a minute so you have a minute so we can wrap on time. I want to be conscious of people's time. So first of all, I'd like you to list who really is essential and who isn't. You've already done so much of this work because you've done reductions in force and furloughing and pay cuts and all the hard decisions you've already had to make. So who is essential and who isn't? Then write down by what category are they essential and not. For example, if you have IP or tech or systems that core workforce is essential for, you leave them in that essential area and you tag by what category they are essential to. Then what I really encourage you to do is think about what looks to be non-essential, but make sure you're incorporating things like cultural ambassadors, people that literally love your business and represent you well inside and out, who are super additive to what you're doing. Look at your highest performers, your up and comers, what we like to call steady eddies, and then low performers who are additive that have a chance to move role goal based on strength, and low performers who aren't culturally additive. If they're still there and you haven't actually been able to move them out of your organization so they can do something that's better suited for themselves, you really want to think about that now. So that's my minute. John?
Yeah, I love that. Everything about it is perfect. And I think that, so from my perspective, to overly simplify things quite a bit, for a long time, we always dream about having this zero base to work from. So I think for today, if you can eliminate the thinking about people for just a minute, right, and think about your organization and what are the roles that are necessary for your organization to be successful, right? What category do those roles fall into? Sort of the classic, do you need to buy it or hire for it? Do you need to get a consultant? Do you need a temp or a gig worker? So what is needed? What is the right mix? And if right now you're in a perfect opportunity to start from a zero base to do that. I'm not suggesting that at the end of that exercise, you're going to have a whole host of easy decisions to make, but you will be well poised from a workforce perspective to having the right mix and the right roles and the right positions to be successful and to add value. And the final thing that I would mention is check with your customers. Again, I'll say it again, your customers are on their own journey. And if you don't ask them, what is that journey, right, you're going to miss out on a great opportunity.
One quick thing I'll add to Jen's point, this client we were thinking of, they also are on a rotational of who goes in when, because some of them actually do have to go in even right now. When we come back, what's wrong with that? Maybe you are passing that baton, and 2 weeks out of every month you're in the office, and then 2 weeks out of the month somebody else is in the office. If you're in an HR team of 2 or 3, or in some cases 20 people, you can rotate. What's wrong with that? Save some of that brick and mortar space and rent that you're paying, and be more green and reduce the carbon footprint, and increase your ability to have a more work-life integrated life at home. And so that would be what I would add to that. So I think that's it. We're a wrap.
Great.
Jen?
Thanks so much, you guys. I just am really grateful to both of you for giving us your time today. And
Thank you.
it was just a wonderful session. And I think, I was taking notes, but what I really think a lot of you guys were talking about is love, So I love you both.
Love you.
Thanks for everybody who joined today. The recording of the session will be available on Biznology. We'll send you out a link. We also have Consultants Collective Corner, where we publish nearly every day. Currently, we are talking about what comes next. What is the impact of COVID-19, and how can you really think about taking this moment to rethink in all the ways John and Dana talked about. And if we can help you in any other way, as I said, we have nearly 40 of these amazing people like John and Dana. If they can help you, or if any of us can help you, please reach out. And with that, we hope you have a lovely weekend filled with lots of Zoom cocktail parties, or coffee clutches, or taking your garbage out and having a drink with your neighbors, or whatever innovative, amazing ways you are all thinking about keeping connected and sane. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Lots
Dana.
of love and light. This
Love
too
you,
shall
kid.
pass. Thank you. See you, brother.
Bye.